Hello, and thanks for tuning in to Plentiful, an Abound Food Care podcast where we take a deeper dive into food care and how we can create a world in which hunger and food waste are eliminated. With your host, Mike Leorakis.
Welcome to Plentiful, the Abound Food Care podcast number 7. Today we're very lucky to have a friend of mine, someone I would consider a friend, but also a food industry legend. Harrold Hermman is joining us. And we're so excited to have Harald because he has this unique perspective. Harald is one of the co-founders, former CEO of Yard House and Darden Restaurants, and then became the CEO of Second Harvest Food Bank, a nonprofit food bank in Southern California. Now Harald is back leading a restaurant company, a merger between Tender Greens and
Takaya Organica.
Open table was
One Table.
One Table. I'm sorry.
One Table Restaurant Brands.
One Table Restaurant Brands. So we're going to talk today about Harald's perspective, that unique perspective of not only the food industry, but how it relates to food insecurity, food waste, and where we're going from his view. So Harald, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. Good to be here.
All right. So you have this unique perspective, but we always have to start off with, how did you end up in the industry? How did you gravitate to this path? Did it find you or did you find it?
I don't know if it found me or the other way around. You know, that's a long time ago. I started as a dishwasher to Marie Callender's, which was close to home, so probably was a convenient job. Mm-hmm. I worked there while I was in high school, and so I was able to work 2 days a week. You know, it was back in the days when you had the letter of approval from the school to work 2 days a week, and you got the sign off from your manager. And I worked a couple of shifts a week in that restaurant, and that's how it started.
But you stayed in it. So in other words, there's so many jobs that, so many of us get jobs to start off with in high school and college and restaurants, and we leave. Yeah. You stuck around in it. What was that pivotal moment, if there was one, that, what prompted you to stick around in it?
Well, at the time, I was actually the only Caucasian team member in the back in the kitchen, and certainly in the dish pit. I didn't speak Spanish. Mm-hmm. And what excited me about the job was the intensity of the shifts, kind of the high, the juice, if you will, of a really intense rush, and getting through that with other people and the teamwork that it takes to make that happen, and the instant gratification of a job well done. I mean, you knew every day whether or not you did a good job or you didn't, based on how the shift went. And it was the camaraderie of people and the sense of teamwork and that instant gratification, I think, in those early days for me when I was 17, that had me coming back. But also there were some really great managers in the building, and I really appreciated the way they treated team members, and there were clearly some mentors there that I wanted that job. I wanted to be that person, so I stuck around.
So what skill sets did you learn at that age, or that entry level, or those first few years, that still carry over and led to your success?
Yeah, I think as I think about it, going back in time, what I learned was the importance of consistency. Our industry is so rooted in consistent product and delivery. I mean, that's what the guest wants, especially if they're a frequent user. And so consistency at the onset, but the importance truly of teamwork and communication, standards of execution. Those things, I think, for me early on, were very impressionable because the planning that it also took to get through a shift, to know when, just in dish terms, when the rush was coming, how to prepare for the rush, what to do and not to do during the rush, how to shut down afterwards. But there's a life cycle and a rhythm to the day that, every day you just tried to master it and do it a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. And that was a challenge, and I enjoyed that. So, leaving the dishwasher, as clean as I possibly could when the manager came through and inspected the dishwasher back in those days,
Yeah.
and literally white glove tested, my area of the restaurant, and I wanted to, I didn't want a manager to find anything. I wanted to find it first, and so it taught me the discipline that was required of someone at my age at the time who wasn't super disciplined to really do a good job. And then that was just one function within a restaurant that, as we all know, has 1,000 moving parts. It was just one function. So it was exciting. I guess it got under my skin.
Yeah, that's we've had staff members in the industry that have gone on to become ambassadors, et cetera, and a lot of them will say it's that some of those skills they learned, especially interpersonal skills, when you work with the public and you work with other team members that maybe don't speak the same language as primarily, you learn to communicate differently and better, and that's a life skill that you carry on in whatever you end up doing in life. But that's good. And now, what about if you could walk us through? How did you end up getting started with Yard House? Can you walk us through that? Because that's, to me, is fascinating, what you developed and what you built.
Well, I mean, that was much further down from the days of working in a dish pit at Marie Callender's, but I was contacted by one of the early partners and investors in Yard House. At the time, it was an idea on paper, and I had come to know him through another business I was working at the time, and he had said, I'd like you to come meet a friend of mine who's got an idea for this concept Yard House, and that was my partner, Steele. And I had an interview scheduled with Steele. I was a young father at the time. I was off. My wife was working, so I had our son. I was babysitting that day. I had childcare, and Steele said, "Bring your son with you." And so I drove to Long Beach, which is where the office was for the Yard House, in I guess pre-opening. Steele was the first employee of the company, and I sat with him for a couple of hours and just listened to him and where he came from in Denver, Colorado, and got a sense for the concept and what his idea was for it. Originally, it was to be much more of a bar-centric concept, peanut shells on the floor and, mirrors on the walls and neon signs and much more straight bar-like. But I was really enamored by the over kind of general broad brush strokes of the concept and Steele. And we sat and talked for a couple of hours, and, one thing led to another. And I took a leap of faith. I mean, it was high risk, no business, no funding fully for the business, a concept on a piece of paper, and a gentleman across the table, basically selling me on this idea of what this could be. And, I was at least young enough where I could still take that chance and that risk, and it was a leap of faith, and I took it. So I became employee number 2. And rolled up my sleeves and we went to work. And a lot of the pre-development work for the brand, I was able to come in and also put some of my fingerprints on how we saw the business from a food and beverage standpoint, and what it would operate and function like as a business. And I was grateful to Steele to be able to allow me to have that voice as well. And as more people joined the team, those additional voices all factored in, and together we shaped out what ended up becoming Yard House.
That's amazing. I was always so impressed that you modernized comfort food. Back then, in my estimation, it's one of the things is you took a basic comfort type food and you elevated it and you created something that was more accessible and modernized to me.
That was actually. I think we certainly had the vision for that, but truly the interpretation of that from a culinary standpoint came when we added our next partner, and that's Carlito Jackson, who was our chef. And he really took the food to the next level. And that's where, when you say modernized, that is where, a casual kind of bar element of food lifted. And I used to mention to people in the early days that we were kind of a mashup. So we would do our R&D. It could be a food truck. It could be a white tablecloth restaurant. Certainly, we were also inspired by what was happening casual around us. But we wanted to be more experiential. And it wasn't just about the food and the beverage. It was how we made you feel by the time you left. And so the full sensory experience was very important. The music,
Yep.
The audio-visual component, the service model, just the whole sensory experience is something that we were very keen on. And partially as a result, both Steele and I, in different places, were in the nightclub business. And so at one point in our careers, and we understood the power of music, and that was something that Steele led, with in the early days, especially kind of the heartbeat of the experience through the music experience. Very important in those days.
Yeah, the total ambiance.
Yeah.
It was a complete package.
Yeah.
So every organization tends to have these roller coaster moments, these ups and downs. And you can sometimes point to a pivotal or seminal moment where you dodged a bullet, or it was just divine intervention or something that comes in front of you and it just leads to success. Were there any pivotal moments or things that stand out in the development of that brand where it was precarious at the beginning, but then you hit a stride?
Well, there's probably dozens of those. Over the lifespan of any business, if you're not innovating, you're dying. And so the innovation process and the many years of building that business certainly had us confronting different challenges along the way. It's just part of any industry, I would imagine. I would say that the biggest hurdle really to overcome was the hurdle at the beginning, because we were undercapitalized.
Yeah.
And
that's usually a death blow.
It is. And, there were times when I didn't know if I'd have a paycheck when I came home. I never told my wife that. And I never shared with her how precarious at times the beginning was in the financing, because the cost of construction went over. We'd overrun costs, and we just didn't have the balance sheet early on. And I think I told her a few years later, how off and on it was there in the early days. But we believed in what we were doing. We believed in the brand, and we had our eyes just focused on getting to that opening day. And once the doors did open, and we're very grateful for Long Beach, the city, not only the city itself and the landlord, but the city planners and everyone that really wanted to see Shoreline Village revitalized, which is where Yard House came to life. But then also, without question, the investors that believed in us in those early days, because we did have limited partners that put money into us, behind us, to bring this to life. But then the city of Long Beach embraced us as a community, and we would never have been able to achieve the level of success, knock on wood, that we had that not happened.
Yeah. So, I was always raised with an understanding that 1 restaurant's manageable, 3 is probably pretty good, but you get over 5, and that's where it becomes difficult, and that's where the mortality rate really hits.
Yeah.
What was the secret, and what, in your estimation, maybe you touched on it when you talked about what you learned early on, but
no, it's people. There is no secret. It's so simple, it's hard. Like-minded people, quality people with the same values, the same work ethic, coming together, committed to one another and to doing right, and to committing to quality, and with a high degree of integrity, moving a business forward. And so the only way that we were able to really grow in any scale, even restaurant number 2 and then 3, was really with the talent that we were able to find, and that believed in us. It really is it's a marriage, and a marriage of mutual respect, especially when you're in a startup, basically. But we were very, very lucky to find some incredible talent in the early days. Carlito being one, Craig Carlisle, another, who really took operations on, and then right down to every team member that we hired. I mean, I still am in contact this many years later with quite a few people from the organization. We were a tribe.
Mm-hmm. So when you expand and you start going international, how do you keep that same feel and philosophy and vibe for staff members?
Yeah. Ironically, it's the same answer. It's people. People committed to the same guest experience, the standards of execution. I mean, clearly, we had to have a very robust training platform, learning the business. Our training department was called Yard Core, in place of hardcore.
Right.
And we did not take that lightly. Our industry, in my opinion, is 50% theater and 50% military execution. The guest doesn't really see the military execution, but they feel it. They feel it in the consistency, and they feel it in how well a business operates. And through our Yard Core program, I mean, even our logo, we had a separate logo for our training department with fatigue colors. We looked to Navy SEALs training, believe it or not,
really,
as an inspiration. Watched Navy SEALs training videos to just complement and maybe sprinkle over how we viewed what we needed to do in order to really express the discipline that is required to deliver a brand consistently day in and day out, especially when it's growing. And so, in the early days, I don't know that I'd be as proud of this today as I was then, but 2 out of 10 managers that were hired on did not survive the first 45 days.
Really?
Because they were flushed out by team members.
Mm-hmm. They
didn't meet the integrity standard or the work ethic. And that was kind of Yard Core. And, the culture of the organization rooted on a group of people coming together. Our mission statement, if you will, which we refer to as our recipe for success, was a statement of values. And when a manager came to work for us, we didn't talk about operations or profitability. All we talked about was values in the first few days and what those meant and why they were so important to us and how they be the foundation for all things. And then as we grew, if someone was excelling or not, you could point back to that value statement and define where in that value statement someone was struggling or why they were succeeding was rooted in those values. And these were communal. So, we actually sat down and scripted those together as a team and believed that they were the things that would lead us, would really support success. I mean, there's a lot of things that have to come together, but the value statement for us as an organization, the culture, the glue that binded the business together is the sole reason why we saw the success we did. It's fully rooted in people.
It's the foundation. It really
it's everything.
Is. Yeah. So in your estimation, how has the industry changed since the mid-90s when you guys got started with that and you built that? How has the industry changed?
Well, I haven't been in the industry for 3 years. I just jumped back in. So it's, the industry has changed. I mean, we've had a massive shift because of the pandemic. And so everything's changed. And I wasn't there for it. I mean, I was at a food bank, as you had mentioned earlier, but I wasn't in the restaurant business. And so I missed the tornado. I showed up on the ground after the damage had been done. And I see a lot of the damage of where the industry is today. And it's, unfortunately during COVID and even post-COVID, I think we became very transactional. We lost the sizzle of the experience that people are looking for, that intangible element of how you made me feel versus I'm just eating something you've given me.
Yeah.
And the industry will find itself again. There many have. Some are still struggling to get onto their feet. To do that, the industry, I guess what I miss about the industry from when I first started is the romance of food and beverage that I think many of us fell in love with. And, over time, can we regain that and not be so much of it just a transaction?
Yeah. You mentioned earlier about the importance of getting the right people, good people who buy in. And now with staffing shortages currently the way they are, we always want to stay away from panic hiring.
Yeah.
But now there's an element of panic hiring. In many cases, and I think we see it everywhere, where you're looking at team members who are either not right for the job or not properly trained.
Yeah.
Is that a necessary evil, or
Well, it was.
How do you navigate that?
It was. I mean, I again, I'm the Monday morning quarterback coming into a company post really the main push through the COVID crisis, and with the turnover that the industry experienced. I'm in fast casual, and it's not uncommon to see numbers of 160+% turnover that companies were going through those 2 years of COVID. So if you just take the turnover rate and then you factor in the lack of training that probably was taking place because it was basically just, plugging holes and putting out fires and just scrambling to stay afloat. On the other side of that, a large amount of new team members and probably many businesses that have been undertrained, some of which may or may not be the right fit, but I think really more than anything, it's the undertraining that did or did not happen, or I'd say in this case didn't happen. That I think is clearly the focus is to reinvigorate the working population that we have in our restaurants, so that the environment that they came into, which was again transactional, is now has to morph into hospitality again and experiential, and that's a bit of a shift for someone that was working in survival mode,
right, for
a good period of time. And it's not PTSD, but there's some fallout, emotional fallout that I could see that people have gone through clearly by being understaffed and by not delivering what I think people recognized at the time and post as the best experience, the best quality. That wears on you.
Yeah,
that chips away at you. And now it's reinstilling pride and quality, and winning back that guest experience, so that we give guests what they deserve.
Yeah. So you got to correct me if I'm wrong, but while you were leading Darden, is that when you started Rounded Up?
So I never led Darden.
I'm sorry.
Darden had a CEO, Gene Lee. Tremendous respect for him, and Gene is now on the board of Darden. But I moved into Orlando for 2 years, and I was asked to lead the specialty restaurant group within Darden.
Got it.
So I was the president of the specialty restaurant group, which had Seasons 52, Bahama Breeze, Capitol Grill, Yard House, Eddie V's in it. And Rounded Up was born in 2009 during the recession. And Yard House is a Southern California concept. And in our community here, I was reading the Register one morning on my way to work, and just reading the headlines. And there was a photograph of a food bank shelf that had just a few cans on it, basically empty shelves. And the story in the headline read, how complicated it was for so many working poor families to make ends meet. And conversely, the fact that food banks were also struggling to meet those needs. And so where would families turn? I had a morning meeting with our VP of marketing, and we sat down and we started to just chat before we got to our agenda. Ironically, Jennifer was reading the same paper, And our conversation turned solely to what can we do to help food banks put food back on the shelf so that they can supply and feed those families out in the community. And the way that I looked at it was the yard houses on average saw between, over 1,000 people a day, foot traffic, which is a magical thing if you think about it. And so the thought turned to how can we leverage the foot traffic that we have in all our restaurants to create awareness to this situation that we find ourselves in our community. And that meeting was on a Friday. I went home. I spent 2 days in my backyard on a laptop writing the business plan for Rounded Up America, and went back on Monday morning with a plan. Met again with Jennifer, and the intention was to allow our guests the ability, and when I say allow, we're super grateful that guests responded, but the guests the ability to round up their check to the nearest dollar. And there's a whole story of how complicated it was to bring that to life for another day, but it was born. And today Rounded Up is raising probably about $4 or $5 million a year. It's not nearly what I think what it's capable of doing. It's been a tough 10-year slog. Ironically, the crisis has shifted many in terms of mindset around giving, and how simple giving, how small change can make big change.
Yeah.
And so Rounded Up is growing today, but that was born really at Yard House. And I'm grateful to our partners at Yard House at the time, also private equity partners, who supported this concept of us doing good for our communities. And the test company, if you will, was Yard House, and we were able to bring the idea to life in our own restaurants, and then took the show on the road, if you will. And Lucille's Barbecue, also a local hometown favorite, has been standing by our side almost since inception. It became the second partner, mission partner, as they're called, in Rounded Up. And today we have DoorDash and Office Depot and Verizon, as well as many restaurant companies, and it's taken on a whole new life form.
It's a simple but brilliant way of allowing everybody to participate in some small way.
It is simple. It does, I think, in many ways reinforce for guests and for team members that we can come together, and together we can affect change in our communities, even in small ways. What was the most surprising to me, maybe not surprising, but team members wanted to know how much did we raise this week in our restaurant, and what difference are we making, and where's the money going? And there was more purpose to showing up for work. It's one thing to serve a great hamburger and a nice cold beer, but when you know that what your company stands for and what you do every day can make a difference as well, it gives you a different swagger.
Yeah, it's more than just a job.
It is more than just a job. And I think looking back, the position and the stance that we took as a brand and as a team in support of our communities is one of the things that really was an important element of our culture. And it's what maintained low turnover and high job satisfaction with team members, because I'd like to say it wasn't just a job for us.
You lamented a little bit earlier that you were out of the industry, the food industry or restaurant industry during COVID, but I would say arguably you had a tremendous impact beyond what you would have been able to make in the restaurant industry. I think you were the right guy at the right time as a CEO of a food bank, of Second Harvest Food Bank during the pandemic. What prompted you to make that career change and that life change and run a food bank?
That's kind of a crazy story. I was CEO of Mendocino Farms at the time, another California concept, great one. And I was working for private equity and with the partners at Mario and Ellen at Mendocino Farms, and we were preparing the company for national expansion. And I learned of an opportunity to at Second Harvest Food Bank. There was a opening for a CEO position. I wasn't looking for a job. My name wasn't out on the street. I had a simple phone call with someone that I used to check in with on occasion, Shelley Haas, Orange County Community Foundation, and Shelley helped me launch Rounded Up America. By the way, helped us launch Rounded Up America, and so I was just having a conversation with Shelley, and she said, "Look, I know you always wanted to be in the nonprofit space. Is that something you'd still like to do?" And I said, "Absolutely, you know that." And she said, "Well, what industry?" She's like leading the witness. What industry would you like to be in? And I said, it's food insecurity. You know how much work we've done with food banks in the past, or it's children. And she said, "There's an opening that I'm aware of. There's a search for a CEO for Second Harvest Food Bank." And I remember exactly where I was, what I was doing. It's like a lightning bolt hit me, and I knew I needed to take the job, which was complicated because I wasn't planning to do that, and neither were the people that I was working for. And so that was not an ideal situation, I think, all the way around. But I followed my heart. I wasn't using my head. I just followed my heart. And I was even asking myself at times, what am I doing? People in the industry tell me, "You're crazy. You do this when you're older and you retire. You don't do this in the prime of your career." And needless to say, I went and fell in love with the food bank, fell in love with the work. And we were about a week into COVID. So this is early March of 2020. And I knew exactly why I'd made that decision.
Mm-hmm.
Like if there was ever a doubt or a question, sometimes you make a turn, you turn left at a fork in the road in your life, and you don't always know why. You just do it. That moment, I just knew, and I never looked back. I would say to this day, more so than Yard House, the most gratifying job I've ever had in my lifetime was the work, and still kind of is. I'm still connected with certain threads back, but was the work at the food bank.
Yeah, well, I will maintain the impact you had was, again, far greater than anything you could have done while in the restaurant industry. It was I maintain you were the right person at the right time in the right place. You're a change agent also.
I appreciate that. I think that ironically, I was a merchant of food before I got there, and I was a merchant of food while I was there. It was just a different model. And maybe the many years I spent in the restaurant business, whether it was growing the business or just in the business in general, prepared me, for that experience at the food bank. I certainly believe that.
Yeah.
Because I was able to walk in with everything was very familiar to me. I had to learn the nuances of nonprofit. I sat on multiple nonprofit boards before, so I understood that. But working with food and how to move food and how important food and nutrition is, which became a real focus for us over those 3 years, that was very familiar.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest impacts you had was maybe a focus away from just providing food and feeding people to providing them with nutrition and focusing on providing them with the right kind of food. I think that was something that had been lacking, and you really brought that forward. And if we look at food insecurity and we look at all the ways we can address it, the first thing you need to do is get that, nutrition needs to be first and foremost. Food safety needs to be right up there as well.
I think it's a natural evolution. I don't know, I believe the food bank would have gotten there anyway. Perhaps we accelerated that evolutionary process as we came together as a team. But when I arrived at the food bank, our success was measured in pounds. And those pounds could be, foods that probably weren't as nutritious as they should be. And, as we looked at our model, besides other work, nutrition became the center point of our work. And because, the question always, and the concept that I heard was, our work is to shorten the line, in essence, reduce the need for our services. Mm-hmm. The only way that I could see that could come to life would be to really address foundational change through nutrition, so that young children had the nutrition to be able to show up in school and have the mental and physical fortitude to be able to learn and be great students, or at least have the fuel to be present and be a better student, because it's education that's truly the way out. It's not food. We supply, as a food bank, we supplied food to help families bridge through difficult financial situations. But truly, the way to shorten the line is to educate young people so they can go out and be productive members of our community, and they can earn the type of living. And let's face it, Orange County is a difficult place for many because of the cost of living, but where nutrition became the center point. And so it really became our North Star as a food bank, while we did all the other work that the food bank has just been done so well with for 30 plus years.
Okay, so you need to challenge me if I'm wrong on this, but I want you, if you don't mind, to tell me what kind of gaps, because one thing we identified were the gaps that existed. Did you see those gaps more clearly after you started running a food bank?
Without a doubt. I mean, I think even in my interview process, the measurement of success for most businesses is growth. Mm-hmm. So when you measure growth, success is perceived to follow. And in my interview process, even with our search committee at the board, I'd said success is not measured by the growth of this organization. It's really measured by us putting ourselves out of business. And, nonprofits, many of them are almost self-sustaining in a way. And there's a self-preservation in the nonprofit space that is really interesting when you observe it on the outside, but when you really are on the inside. And I don't necessarily mean the food bank. I mean, in general, the industry, I think a lot of nonprofits should be working really hard to put themselves out of business. And, by way of example, if you're a cancer organization, you want to cure cancer. Well, that puts you out of business. Mm-hmm. But that's the North Star. And, how to get to eliminating food insecurity, which not even eliminate, it's not so much about hunger. Food insecurity will probably always be with us. The question is to what degree. And what I saw coming in was a lot of siloed nonprofits competing with one another for attention, for donor money, for staff, for influence, and all great organizations, all focused on their mission, but ironically canceling each other out oftentimes. And to me, part of the key for any community is for those nonprofits, especially the ones that are like-minded, to come together and to leverage synergies where and whenever possible, but more importantly, to focus on the same ends so that those business strategies and plans actually work in concert with one another or complement one another, so that the mission for both, can be achieved, can be served. And so it was very interesting to get a real inside look under the hood, if you will, behind the curtain of how complex the nonprofit community can be, but also how beautiful it can be once galvanized under the same mission.
Yeah, which really brings us to a unique scenario in Orange County that's duplicated in other areas where you had two food banks in one area. Cordial, assistant and cooperative, but never coordinated. So that brings us to what is really impressive, which was the OC Hunger Alliance, which really you were the fuel behind that. So I think that really leads to what the goal of the Hunger Alliance was. Can you touch on that for us?
Yeah, again, I appreciate the kind words. I wouldn't say I was the fuel behind it. I think, it's timing. And I believe there were like-minded people that you're one of them, because you're a third, if there were three legs of the stool for the Orange County Hunger Alliance, Abound Food Care, and you, Mike, were one of those legs. And the other is Orange County Food Bank, our sister organization across town. And
Mark Lowry.
Mark Lowry. And Mark, was a mentor to me. I mean, Mark had been at food banking now for probably almost 30 years at the time, over 30 years. Yeah. And I was the student. And, in my first, I think I was on board for about a month. There were 2 meetings that I took as I was trying to understand the landscape in Orange County. One was with you and one was with Mark. And ironically, the conversation, which was very much just that free-flowing conversation, had me go in a direction where I just saw validation across the table of what it felt like we were all saying at the time. And I don't think it was that complicated. We just kind of all fell in the pool together and realized that if we came together, we could do more good. Bringing that to life is a different story, but acknowledging that might be the best way forward was that first step. And the Orange County Hunger Alliance certainly I believe is a great indication of stepping out of our silos. And with 2 food banks by way of example in Orange County, competing for revenue, competing for volunteers, competing for food, attention, all those things, for us to come together, with you also kind of back and forth as the glue between both, for us to come together and start to address and map out a strategy for the county, and not a strategy just for today, but a strategy for tomorrow and long beyond. That was key. And the irony of all of that is that predated COVID. And it was that shared acknowledgement of partnership work that I believe also immediately and truly accelerated during the COVID crisis. I mean, we were sharing food. We were sharing revenue. We applied for grants together as 2 food banks. Never in the history of food banking in Orange County had that happened. And and then the work during COVID and post-COVID to map out a longer view on how to address food insecurity in the county with both food banks and Abound Food Care working together. Now also coupled with farmers in the community through solutions for urban agriculture. That ripple, I guess if you could call it that, in the pond, that little pebble that we threw in pre-COVID, those ripples started to expand. And then, pulling in the county and other nonprofits and other agencies and other like-minded people, I hope that movement continues. I believe that it will. But I think that was the best indication of stepping out of a silo and trusting one another.
Yeah.
And really focusing on the thing that mattered most. And that was the people that needed us most, and putting our own business aside for a moment. Granted, we still had to be mindful and careful of not crossing wires and doing the right thing, but we put the community first, and then we just decided how can we best serve those ends, and we'll figure everything else out as we go.
Yeah, and I think there's elements of what you spoke about earlier about how people are the key. I think there was a comfort level amongst those of us in the Hunger Alliance with each other. So as we chatted, there was a shared mutual vision of what we wanted to accomplish. I think that helped.
Well, it most certainly did. I mean, the fact that you and Mark had such a long-standing friendship was material. I mean, I think Mark probably thought I was a crazy guy at first. And, I had to earn Mark's trust over time. And, I consider Mark a friend today. Still consider him a mentor. And if you look at Mark's legacy, and he's still at the food bank, but, he's committed his lifetime to serving those in need in the county. And he truly is, if you want to talk legend, you refer to me as a legend in an opening, which I disagree with, but Mark Lowry is a legend to me.
Yeah, he's impressive with the amount of time, what he's been through, what he's seen, and you're right, just the commitment. But again, I still look at other parts of the country, the nation's looking at this model because it works, and it's in its infancy.
You mean the Orange County Hunger Alliance model?
Yeah.
Well, if you're not innovating, you're dying, in business. I think the nonprofit community should take a page out of that book. And it requires risk. I think that's one of the things that nonprofits are afraid of is risk and failure. But if you're not failing, you're not thriving. And, of every 10 ideas, you have 7 fail. But you got to stick your neck out. A turtle doesn't get anywhere unless it sticks its head out of its shell. And, I think part of the cultural awakening for us as a food bank was to take more risk and to learn from mistakes quickly, fail fast, and move forward. But I think the beauty of what has been taking place and continues to happen in Orange County is the innovation of new concepts and new concepts that are taking hold. They're not just an idea. Whether it's the Orange County Hunger Alliance, whether it's a focus on nutrition, whether it's the farms that have come to life that are now growing food, again, based on models that predated the Orange County Hunger Alliance work. But these are scalable. The food rescue program that's alive and working here through Abound Food Care, as well as a material component of all of that work. Those are templates. They're still being shaped. It's design build.
Yeah.
When there's nothing that predates it, you have to figure it out as you go.
Right.
But there's a template that Orange County is bringing to life that's funded by the business community and by donors and by the sweat equity of everybody in these nonprofits that truly is groundbreaking for as a model for other communities across the nation. And I hope that others are paying close attention to what's happening here and taking the best of what we've learned the hard way and applying it in whatever way they can to shape out a plan that works for them wherever they may be.
Yeah.
And that truly ties back to the leadership of both food banks, Orange County Food Bank, the Second Harvest Food Bank, as well as Abound Food Care, and all of the participants, again, the donors in the community, and all of the mission partners that those 3 organizations are tied to. That's what makes it work. I mean, this community has come together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Now, in the private sector, you're the master of your own destiny for all intents and purposes. Through the food bank, and in this segment, meaning the nonprofit sector, government plays a role, public sector plays a role, for better or for worse.
Yeah.
You've experienced it now in a different way. Can you articulate what you think the role of the public sector should be and can be in this endeavor?
Well, I mean, I think first I would flip it first. I think the role of nonprofits is to clearly articulate a strategy that resonates with the public sector. Mm-hmm. The public sector needs to get behind something that works. And I think, I've at least from my own personal experience, whenever we were meeting, whether that was with Orange County supervisors or city mayors or really anyone from the city or county, whether it's local or at the county level, a lot of very well-intentioned, hardworking individuals that if they understood the plan that we were presenting, to be honest, we didn't have a lot of doors slammed in our face, if you will. And especially when you show up together. So I think part of the responsibility for any nonprofit is to show value to a community service leader who has to make budgetary decisions on where to place their bets. Where am I going to get the most for my buck? Where can I make an impact in my community? And when nonprofits especially come out of their silos and show up together under the same flag to do the same work, if I was sitting on the other side of the table working at a county or a city office, I'd say, well, that's where I'm going to put my money because I know I'm going to get more for my money there. I see collaboration happening. I see impact, or I see the prospect of that, and I want to get behind that. And so, government I think oftentimes just doesn't have enough of the facts, the granular facts. And it's up to us to educate, public officials on truly have them have a clear understanding as well as vision of the art of the possible, so that they can make the best decision possible. And that's not lobbying. It's not like, look at us because it's us. I found, ironically, I know some people might say, well, it's too difficult to work with government and the legislation that comes about and the red tape and all the things that you hear. But the reality is that is our reality. So figure it out.
Yeah.
Come together and figure it out. I've come to find the county, especially really all the city mayors in the county, especially during the crisis. I think if there was ever a time to show us what we're capable of as a community, it was the crisis.
Yeah.
The real danger is that the further we get away from the storm that was COVID, the more we forget how difficult it was or how important it was to come together, and we start to step into our silos again.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I worry about most, is that happens.
It's easy to retreat back to a comfort level of how we used to work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, I said many times that I witnessed the best of humanity in those 3 years.
Yeah.
At every level.
It's true. It's very true. All right. So I got to ask you another question. First of all, you've been involved in philanthropy your whole career. You've supported nonprofits, some near and dear to your heart, like Susan G. Komen Foundation, Food Insecurity. How do we get the point across to fund impact as opposed to activity? How do we subtly get the point across that you can have an impact and your dollars go a long way, but it can also be a detriment if you're funding a disjointed effort? Or is that just not possible to get that across?
No, I think it's possible. Not that I am an expert in this, so I'll only speak to it through my food bank lens. But I think I recognized as I was getting to know donors, especially longtime donors of the food bank, and there are many, and the food bank would not be doing the great work that it's doing without those individuals, corporations, family trusts, individuals. What resonated for me is what I could recognize when I was looking into the eyes of donors, when they saw our approach was more focused on structural change than on maintenance. And we can maintain a problem by providing food, by way of example. Trucks are rolling as we speak out of that food bank. I see, as I drive up to downtown several days a week, it's not uncommon for me to drive by a food bank truck, which is, I appreciate still seeing those trucks on the road. But in many ways, that's maintenance. That's bringing food to families who need that food today to get by today. The real question is, how are we gonna make that change? And to me, it really is addressing a root cause or going to structural work that can change the trajectory or the direction of how the organization services its community in such a way that, what may take years, it's not a short-term solution. Like if you're talking about nutrition for young children, well, you can't measure that until they're on the other side of high school. That's literally a 10-year strategy. However, when you just speaking to nutrition as an example, sometimes the answer is so simple it's hard. And the approach to nutrition or the approach to stepping out of our silos, the approach to growing our own food locally, the approach to reducing waste and then repurposing food where and when possible, those things resonated with donors. And, the early on conversations where you could see that twinkle in someone's eye, yes, that's something I could stand behind, or that's something that would keep me engaged. I'd like to participate in that, whether it's through financial or sweat equity, whatever it is from a provider. That's what we were able to really garner from those conversations. And that's not to say that we just came up with a plan because that's what we thought people wanted, but we felt we were onto something by putting together a foundational plan that had a long view, where donors recognized that as something that would have a long-lasting impact and positive impact in the community. And they also recognized that the work that we were doing, while fantastic and really important, wasn't going to, really change the direction of food insecurity if you looked forward. And so in many ways, I guess all those early conversations with donors and the validation that we got from donors or from other stakeholders that we met with, even in our conversations, Mike, or with Mark, those helped shape the strategy. And so it's almost a shared consciousness of what we needed to do. And then donors got behind it.
They fall in line, yeah.
They locked arms.
Yeah.
Less falling in line, but locking arms with us on the work.
So tell us about Solutions for Urban Agriculture.
So Solutions for Urban Agriculture, led by A.G. Kawamura and a very talented board of farmers and experts in food growing, came together with us and with SCREC, which is the South Coast Research and Extension Center, long word, in Irvine, where we were able to bring 45 acres into a growing strategy for the food bank. And again, donors, this is something donors had to get behind, right? So we recognized that nutrition was paramount and a North Star to long-term success in the community. What better way than to grow your own and to leverage assets that you have in your own backyard? Ironically, there was land in our own backyard. We have farmers in our community. We had SCREC that had this land and was willing to partner with us. We had a vision. We had support from Abound Food Care and from the Orange County Food Bank, and we had donors that also saw this as a viable solution. And we leapt. Again, it's risk. Mm-hmm. It's taking the risk to chase something and to bring it to life. And so we've planted 45 acres. We plant them in parcels, but net the Solutions Farm, which it's called, the Harvest Solutions Farm, is producing 40,000 pounds of produce a week.
That's amazing.
In our backyard, and it's one farm. So again, the art of the possible mm-hmm. is amazing. And if you talk to AG, which I did again many times, AG's often said to me that there's enough land and enough resources that we could end hunger in our community by growing food locally in our own backyards. It just we have to have a confluence of public and private partnership, and the stakeholders that are focused on those ends have to come together to bring that to life. And that in fact happened in October of last year, when the first harvest took place. The first planting for the Harvest Solutions Farm was on August 31st of 2021, and I've worked on that farm with my children, mm-hmm. And I've pulled weeds, I've harvested product. I don't do as often as I like, but it is amazing to me to now watch a broad group of people that have come together to make that happen. And, our goal through Solutions for Urban Agriculture, not unlike the work that's happening at Abound Food Care with food waste and a template for others to follow, is to see other farms come to life and to take this learning and this knowledge and this model, if you will, of these different stakeholders and to duplicate that in counties elsewhere at this scale. I mean, there are others that are growing food. Harvesting 40,000 pounds of food a week is no small undertaking.
Yeah.
It's a massive project. And we're capable in Orange County alone. I believe we're capable of probably growing around 2 million pounds of food a month in our community. We just have to figure out how to get there.
Right. And then you factor that in other communities, in neighboring areas, Los Angeles, San Diego, I mean, all these various areas, that template holds true. And now we're really making a significant impact.
And if you bookend it, and we grow that amount of food, and we bookend it on the other side by redirecting the waste of food, what does that mean in terms of, now I would say pounds, for the community at large? And that's really where the magic is.
Yeah, I agree. Real briefly, from your unique perspective, you mentioned consumer trends. One of those keys to success is you knew your customer. You provided an experience. So is it safe to say that a lot of the food waste that we experience is ultimately consumer driven? In other words, the consumer demands a certain type of product. Has that led, again, looking at from a food waste perspective, is it a consumer issue? In other words, we hear all the time, people will ask farmers, why do you leave so much product out in the field? And they'll explain, we have a contract to provide a certain amount of food, and it's a living thing. It ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
What can the industry do?
That's a big problem to solve. I think inherently it's the American consumer landscape and our demand for access and variety that really is at the root of that problem. And when you walk into a supermarket in this country and you see tens of thousands of SKUs, many of them perishable, on the shelf, and that's what you expect as a consumer, therein lies the beginning of the problem.
Yeah.
And we have shopping carts that are really big that fill up easily. So we typically buy more than we need. We bring it home, put it in the refrigerator. How many of us have thrown food out at home? I'm sure that resonates for all of us, myself included. We've tried very hard as a family to buy only what we need for a few days. And you translate that into a restaurant environment and a menu offering. It's a complicated space. I think the awareness around waste and reducing waste and yields, whether it's directly from a grower, through supply chain, through the distribution network or the co-packer network, then into the restaurant sector, there are a lot of variables along that chain, that custody of food that we're thinking has to shift.
Yeah.
Maybe a more minimalistic approach to a degree. But I can tell you this, if we were a third world nation and we had people scrambling to find food, we wouldn't behave the way that we do.
Right.
Excess has been, I think, part of the thing that we have to really wrap our heads around and solve for. But this farm to table movement that's started to take shape, this buy local, grow local, is probably more closely aligned with what you'd see in Europe. And I think over time, even as producers, and we have to produce at scale. I mean, there's no way around that because we have so many people to feed. But I think there are answers and solutions there. But definitely the beginning is to just all recognize that we have waste.
Yeah.
And how can we reduce waste?
And I think, the youngest consumers, they're starting to redefine value. It's no longer how much food is on a plate or how much food you're you have that you're taking with you. It's more of an emphasis on sustainability, on flavors.
Absolutely. It's quality, not quantity. It's experience. It's not assets. I have 5 kids, so I've got multiple, generations, and I could see through them how a younger generation has shifted. And, when we look at the world today with all the complications that we're facing right now, the value system has shifted. And, it was really during COVID and other things were happening in the world. I literally looked at my 2 boys and I said, I want to apologize to you because my generation didn't get it right. We screwed it up. And you have to carry the torch. This is something you're going to have to fix. Yeah. And, it may not be millennials. It may not be Gen Z or Y. It's probably Z and later. I think that's where the answers lie. The question is, do we have the time?
Yeah. It's a great point. Harald, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for your perspective. And thanks for your leadership and being there for us and helping to change a movement. Appreciate it very much.
You've been a great partner, and I look forward to maintaining that moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for listening to Plentiful, an Abound Food Care podcast. You can find the Plentiful podcast on Anchor, Spotify, Apple, Google, and wherever you find your podcasts. Visit our website, www.aboundfoodcare.org, for more information about Abound Food Care and how to donate and support Abound Food Care. Keep up with us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.